They threw Coca-Cola on the waitress for fun, laughing as she stood there dripping and humiliated. Just another nobody they could disrespect without consequences. What they didn't know, her husband was a mafia boss, and he just found out what they did to his wife. Sofia Ramirez had been on her feet for 6 hours straight. The Riverside Grand Hotel's crystal ballroom sparkled under 1,000 lights as Manhattan's wealthiest clinked champagne glasses and laughed too loudly. Sofia moved between tables like a ghost, refilling drinks, clearing plates, invisible to people whose net worth could buy her apartment building 10 times over. She didn't mind being invisible. In fact, she preferred it. 4 years at the Riverside Grand had taught her that invisibility was a survival skill in a place like this. The less these people noticed you, the less opportunity they had to make you feel small. And tonight the ballroom was packed with Manhattan's elite Wall Street executives, real estate tycoons, old money families with names that appeared on buildings and parks. The annual Riverside Foundation Gala was the hotel's most prestigious event, with tickets starting at $5,000 per plate. "More champagne, table 7, her manager hissed, snapping his fingers. Sofia nodded, balancing a silver tray as she weaved through designer gowns and tailored suits. Her black uniform shoes pinched her toes and her lower back ached from hours of perfect posture, but her face betrayed nothing. Professional, pleasant, invisible. Table 7 was the worst. 5 men in their late 20s, drunk since cocktail hour, celebrating something they called the Sterling expansion. Their laughter had an edge to it, the kind that came from people who'd never been told no. They'd been demanding drinks all night, sending back perfectly good appetizers, and making comments just loud enough for the staff to hear, but not quite loud enough to cause a scene. Finally, one of them drawled as Sofia approached. His name tag read Ethan Sterling. Blonde hair, perfect teeth, a watch that cost more than her car. "Thought we'd die of thirst." "My apologies, sir." Sofia kept her voice neutral, professional. She'd learned long ago not to react. She began pouring champagne into crystal flutes, careful not to spill a drop. The bottle was heavy and her arms were tired, but her movements remained precise and elegant. As she poured, Ethan grabbed his friend's phone, scrolling through something that made them all cackle. Sofia caught a glimpse of photos of themselves posing with bottles, making faces. Rich boys playing at being wild. One of them showed Ethan pretending to snort something off a bathroom counter. Another showed him kissing 2 women at once. College frat boy humor preserved into adulthood by wealth and privilege. "Sofia Wright," Ethan squinted at her name tag. "That's pretty. Spanish." "Yes, sir," she replied, continuing to serve the other guests at the table. "You got a boyfriend, Sofia?" The question dripped with condescension, like he was doing her a favor by acknowledging her existence. "I'm married, sir." She didn't elaborate. She never did with guests like these. Her personal life wasn't for their entertainment. "Married?" His friends erupted in exaggerated gasps. "Lucky guy. What's he do?" "Let me guess. Waiter, Uber driver." Sofia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "He works in construction." This sent them into hysterics. "Construction classic. Bet he's got a beer gut and a pickup truck." The friend beside Ethan slapped the table, spilling his drink slightly. "Does he wear one of those hard hats with the American flag on it?" She said nothing. The champagne bottle was empty. She should leave. She'd been in this industry long enough to recognize when a conversation was veering into dangerous territory. Wait. Ethan stood up, swaying slightly. The room was loud enough that no one else noticed their table, the music, and 100 conversations providing a shield of privacy. "I got a question." Sofia paused, her face carefully composed into professional neutrality. "When you go home tonight, you going to tell him about us? About how you serve rich people all day?" Ethan leaned in closer, invading her space. Sofia could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath, mixed with mint and entitlement. "Ethan, sit down," one of his friends muttered, but he was grinning. Phone raised, recording the interaction. The red light blinked in the corner of Sofia's vision. "This is going to be gold." "I'm just curious," Ethan continued, louder now. A few nearby tables glanced over, then quickly looked away, not wanting to involve themselves. "Does it bother you? Seeing all this, knowing you'll never have it, all this money, these people, this is a different world, right? One you'll never be part of." Sofia's heart pounded, but her expression remained impassive. 10 more seconds and she could walk away. Just endure 10 more seconds. Have a good evening, gentlemen. She turned to leave, clutching her empty bottle and silver tray like a shield. Hey, I'm talking to you. What happened next took 3 seconds, but Sophia would remember it in slow motion forever. Ethan grabbed a glass of Coca-Cola from the table, one of the sodas they had ordered for mixing drinks. He took 2 steps forward, and while his friends howled with laughter and one raised a phone to record, he poured the entire glass over Sophia's head. The liquid was cold, shockingly cold. It ran down her face, her neck soaking into her white uniform blouse. Ice cubes hit her shoulders and scattered across the marble floor. The caramel-colored liquid trickled down her forehead into her eyes, dripped from her chin onto the ballroom's polished floor. The nearby tables went silent. Women gasped. Men stared. Sophia stood, frozen cola dripping from her hair, her eyelashes. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The humiliation was physical, crushing a weight on her chest that made the room spin. Her uniform clung to her skin, sticky and cold. A drop of soda rolled down her spine beneath her clothing, making her shiver. Ethan's friends were dying, laughing, slapping the table. "Oh my God, dude, did you get that? Send it to the group chat?" One of them was practically crying with laughter, pointing at Sophia's ruined uniform. Another held up his phone, still recording every moment of her humiliation. "What is going on here?" The manager, Robert Thompson, appeared at her side, his face, red eyes darting between Sophia and the Sterling table. He took one look at Ethan's smirking face and his expression changed. Fear, recognition of power. The knowledge that the man standing before him was the son of Richard Sterling, whose company owned 3 luxury hotels in Manhattan, including the Ritz-Carlton, where Robert's boss played golf every Sunday. "She was rude to our guests," Ethan said casually, sitting back down. "Just teaching some manners." The manager grabbed Sophia's arm, fingers digging into her flesh. "I am so sorry, Mr. Sterling. Sophia, go to the break room. Now." His voice was tight, controlled panic just beneath the surface. "But I didn't," Sophia began, her voice small and shaking. "Now." The manager's grip tightened painfully, his eyes wide with warning. Sophia stumbled away past the staring faces, past the whispers. Her shoes squished with each step, leaving faint, sticky footprints on the pristine floor. The ballroom seemed endless, the walk to the service door an eternity. Someone's date covered her mouth, eyes wide with secondhand embarrassment. An older woman looked away, uncomfortable but silent. A man in an expensive tuxedo whispered something to his companion, and they both laughed softly. No one said anything, no one helped. In the staff bathroom, Sophia locked the door and stared at her reflection. Cola matted her dark hair. Her mascara ran in black streaks down her cheeks. The blouse, the one she'd ironed carefully this morning, was ruined, the previously crisp white fabric now stained a sickly brown. Her gold wedding band gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a reminder of a world outside this moment of humiliation. She didn't cry. She'd learned years ago that crying changed nothing. Instead, she methodically began to clean herself up. She washed her face, rinsed her hair in the sink as best she could. The cold water mixed with the sticky soda, sending brown rivulets down the drain. She dabbed at her blouse with paper towels, but the damage was done. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her husband, Dante Morelli. "How's work, amore?" Sophia stared at the message. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could tell him. She could tell Dante everything. Her husband was protective, loving, fiercely devoted. He would be furious. But then what? People like the Sterlings didn't face consequences. They owned buildings like this one. They owned managers and lawyers and probably half the city council. If she complained, she'd lose her job. The Riverside Grand wasn't just a bond, it was health insurance. It was the savings they were building for her dream of opening a small restaurant one day. It was stability. And if Dante complained, he'd look crazy. A construction worker going after a billionaire family? No. Better to stay quiet. Better to survive. She typed back, "Fine. Home by midnight. Love you." She deleted the first draft where she typed, "Had a small accident, nothing serious." No need to worry him with half-truths. Better a complete lie than a partial truth that would only raise questions. She tossed the cola-soaked blouse in a trash bag, changed into her backup uniform. Thank God she always kept one in her locker after a guest had spilled red wine on her last year, and fixed her makeup. 20 minutes after the incident, she looked presentable again. No one would know just by looking at her what had happened. But she knew. She felt it in the stickiness that remained in her hair, in the phantom sensation of cold liquid running down her back, in the burning humiliation that still flushed her cheeks. Sofia Ramirez Morelli, 32 years old, daughter of immigrants, honors graduate from community college, wife of Dante, dreamer of opening her own little place, someday reduced to this. A service worker who had to smile through abuse because the alternative was worse. She straightened her shoulders and returned to her shift with her head down, hoping to avoid Robert. No such luck. Sophia, he caught her in the service corridor. His voice was tight. The Sterlings are important clients. I didn't do anything, Robert. I don't care. He cut her off. They're saying you were rude. That's all that matters. You're on thin ice. You saw the video. You know what happened. What I know, Robert said, leaning close, is that the Sterling Group does 8 corporate events here annually. What I know is that Richard Sterling personally signs off on our contract renewal. What I know is that they are not people we antagonize. He straightened his tie. You finish your shift. You stay away from table 7, and tomorrow we'll discuss your future here. Sophia nodded numb. This was how the world worked. The rich did what they wanted. Everyone else adapted. What Sophia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that one of the kitchen staff, a young guy named Marco, who'd always been kind to her, had watched the whole thing through the service door. Marco, who was furious enough to do something stupid. Marco, whose cousin Vinny worked as a driver for Dante Morelli. And by dawn, a video of Ethan Sterling pouring soda on a waitress would be sitting on the desk of Dante Morelli, the man who controlled every cement truck, every steel shipment, every construction permit in New York City. The man who built this city's foundations. The man whose wife had just been humiliated in front of Manhattan's elite. But that night, as Sophia rode the subway home with wet hair and a fake smile, she had no idea that in less than 7 days, the Sterling family would learn a lesson they'd never forget. You don't disrespect a queen just because she's wearing an apron. Luca Romano had worked for Dante Morelli for 15 years. In that time, he delivered a lot of bad news. Arrests, betrayals, shipments gone wrong. He'd learned to keep his face neutral, his voice steady. But this morning, driving through pre-dawn Manhattan with his phone burning a hole in his pocket, his hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. The video had come at 5:47 a.m. An unknown number, no message, just a file. Luca almost deleted it, probably spam. Then he pressed play. 23 seconds that made his blood go cold. By 6:15, he was pulling up to Dante's brownstone in Brooklyn. The one that didn't appear on any property records, the one with flowers in the window boxes and a basketball hoop in the driveway. The house that looked like it belonged to a normal family. From the outside, no one would guess that this modest home belonged to one of the most powerful men in New York, a man whose influence extended from the concrete foundations of Manhattan's skyscrapers to the depths of City Hall, whose name was whispered with respect and fear in certain circles, but remained unknown to the general public. That was exactly how Dante wanted it. Power thrived in shadows. Maria, Dante's housekeeper, let him in with a knowing look. He's having breakfast. Maria had been with the family for 12 years. She knew that Luca's early morning visits never brought good news. Dante sat at the kitchen table in a white t-shirt and reading glasses. Newspapers spread before him, an espresso cooling beside his hand. At 45, he still had the build of the construction worker he'd once been. Broad shoulders, calloused hands. His hair was graying at the temples. He looked like any other working-class guy starting his day. That was Dante's greatest strength. He could move between worlds comfortable, in both the gritty reality of construction sites and the polished boardrooms where billions changed hands. He glanced up. Luca, 6 in the morning, this better be important. Luca set his phone on the table. You need to see this. Dante frowned but picked up the phone. Luca watched his boss's face as the video played. The ballroom, the laughter, Ethan Sterling's smirking face, the glass tipping, Sophia's frozen expression as Coca-Cola poured over her head. Dante's jaw tightened. His knuckles went white around the phone. The video ended. Silence filled the kitchen except for the tick of the wall clock. For most men, rage showed in explosive outbursts. For Dante, it manifested in stillness, a predator's focus before the strike. When Dante's voice was quiet, dangerous, and last night, Riverside Grand Hotel, some charity gala. Luca paused. Kitchen worker sent it to me. Kid named Marco. He's clean. Works with Sophia sometimes. Said he couldn't sleep after watching it happen. Dante played the video again and again. His face showed nothing, but Luca knew that look, that stillness. It was the same expression Dante wore before he dismantled a rival crew in the 90s. The same face he had when someone crossed a line you didn't come back from. She didn't tell me. Dante set the phone down carefully. She came home. Said work was fine. Kissed me goodnight like nothing happened. She probably didn't want you to worry. Worry, Dante laughed hollow. My wife gets humiliated in public, and she's worried about me. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. A garbage truck rumbling past. Someone walking a dog. Normal life. The life Sophia had tried to protect by staying silent. The life Dante had built for them, brick by careful brick, and to keep her insulated from who he really was, what he really did. I want everything on the kid in the video, Dante said. Everything on the hotel. Who owns it? Who was there? Who? Boss. Luca's voice stopped him. There's more. Watch the background, around the 12-second mark. Dante picked up the phone again, his brow furrowed. He watched, paused, zoomed in, and froze. Behind Ethan, barely visible in the crowd, stood an older man in an expensive suit. Late 50s gray hair, confident posture. He was holding a drink, talking to someone, oblivious to what his son was doing 10 feet away. Or perhaps not oblivious, perhaps simply unconcerned. When you're rich enough, your son's cruelties become mere eccentricities. That's Richard Sterling, Luca said quietly. Dante's face went pale. No. Yeah, Richard Sterling. You're Richard Sterling. Same guy. Dante sat down heavily. For the first time since Luca had known him, his boss looked genuinely shaken. Luca understood why. This wasn't just about Sophia anymore. This was complicated. Richard Sterling, the legitimate businessman Dante had been working with for 3 years, through carefully constructed shell companies. The real estate developer who needed Dante's cement suppliers and union connections, but could never know who Dante really was. The man who represented Dante's bridge to legitimacy to a future where perhaps someday his business would be entirely clean, where Sophia would never have to know the darker parts of how he built their life. Their arrangement had been perfect, profitable, quiet, deniable. 3 shared construction projects worth $40 million. Contracts that looked clean on paper but funneled cash through backdoor channels. Richard got buildings built on time and under budget. Dante got his money laundered through legitimate development deals. 2 men from different worlds using each other for mutual benefit, never quite friends, but respectful partners in a delicate dance of plausible deniability. They'd met face to face only twice, always in neutral locations, always carefully. Richard thought Dante was just a well-connected contractor. Dante had intended to keep it that way, and now this, the worlds colliding in the worst possible way. That's his son. Dante's voice was barely a whisper. Betrayal and rage warred in his eyes. Ethan Sterling, 27, heir to the family business, Princeton education, 0 work ethic. Luca pulled up a photo on his own phone. Party boy, DUIs covered up, harassment complaints settled quietly. Daddy's golden child. Dante stared at the frozen frame of Richard in the background. He was there. He saw it happen. Looks like it. And he did nothing. Luca said nothing. There was nothing to say. In that moment of inaction, Richard Sterling had made a choice. He had chosen his son's entitlement over basic human decency. He had chosen power over respect. And in Dante's world, respect was everything. Money came and went. Respect was the true currency. Dante stood again, his movements sharp now, controlled rage replacing shock. He walked to the coffee maker, poured a cup he didn't drink, set it down. Thinking, calculating. Luca had seen this process before. When Dante moved past emotion to strategy, decisions were made that resonated for years. Call everyone, he said finally. Meeting tonight. I want intel on every Sterling project, every contract, every permit, every dollar they owe. I want to know where they bank, where they're vulnerable, who they're afraid of. Boss, if we move on them, the business arrangement is over. Dante's voice cut like steel. You don't get to humiliate my wife and then expect me to help build your empire. Luca nodded. He didn't need further explanation. Dante Morelli had built his operation on a code that his men understood intuitively. Family was sacred, respect was non-negotiable, power without honor was meaningless. The Sterling family had violated all three principles in 23 seconds of video. What about Sophia? Does she know about any of this? She knows I work construction. She knows I do well. She doesn't know the rest. Dante's expression softened for just a moment the way it always did when he spoke of his wife. She thinks I'm a union foreman who got lucky. I want to keep it that way. That might be hard if Dante's phone buzzed. Then Luca's. Then both phones lit up with news alerts. In the age of social media, 23 seconds could travel around the world before breakfast. Sterling Group issues statement after viral incident. Luca grabbed his phone, scrolling. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. The press release was already everywhere, pushed to major outlets at 7 a.m. sharp. The Sterling PR machine was efficient. Luca had to give them that. They'd already crafted a narrative, a version of events that shifted blame and protected the family name. Classic crisis management for the wealthy. Sterling Group regrets the unfortunate incident at last night's charity gala. While we support all service industry workers, preliminary investigations suggest the employee in question behaved unprofessionally toward guests prior to the incident. We take workplace conduct seriously and trust the Riverside Grand Hotel will address this matter appropriately. The Sterling family remains committed to fostering a culture of respect across all our ventures and apologizes for any discomfort this incident may have caused other guests. The rest was corporate nonsense. Dante read it twice. His face had gone cold again, that dangerous stillness returning. Luca had seen men mistake that stillness for weakness. Those men were no longer in positions to make mistakes. They're blaming her, he said softly. They're covering their asses, Luca corrected. Trying to control the narrative before it spreads. Before it spreads. Dante set his phone down with deliberate care. They think this goes away with a press release. They think I'll read this and let it go because of our business. They think I need them more than they need me. He looked up at Luca, and for the first time that morning he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted a weakness in its prey. Call the meeting for tonight, and Luca find out everything about their current construction projects. I want to know which ones can't finish without us. All of them, boss. They all need us. Good. Dante picked up his coffee, finally taking a sip. Then let's see how they build an empire when the foundation crumbles. Outside, the sun rose over Brooklyn, painting the brownstone gold. Inside, a war had just been declared. The Sterlings just didn't know it yet. The meeting room was in a warehouse in Red Hook that officially stored restaurant equipment. Unofficially, it was where Dante held court when decisions needed to be made away from listening devices and prying eyes. The building was registered to a shell corporation, which was owned by another shell corporation, which was managed by a law firm that had no idea who their actual client was. Layers of protection, just like the foundations Dante poured for skyscrapers. Each layer invisibly supporting the next. By 8:00 p.m., 7 men sat around a metal table under the fluorescent lights. These were Dante's captains, the men who ran his operations across the city. Construction supply, trucking, unions, waste management, the legitimate businesses that generated millions while quietly moving money from less legitimate sources. They were a study in contrasts. Some dressed in expensive suits, others in work clothes. Some had college educations, others had learned everything on the streets. But they shared a common trait, absolute loyalty to Dante Morelli. Not just because they feared him, though they did, but because he had earned their respect. In a world of broken promises, Dante's word was iron. Tommy the Hammer Bergosi spoke first. He was old school, 60 years old with scarred knuckles and zero patience. Tommy had earned his nickname in the 80s by his preferred method of conflict resolution. These days he managed the union connections, but the old fire still burned in his eyes. We grabbed the kid tonight. Make an example. Agreed, said Victor Orsi, who ran the cement contracts. Younger than Tommy, but no less direct. You disrespect the boss's wife, you disappear. Simple. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Luca stood in the corner, arms crossed, silent. He had already had this conversation with Dante in the car. He knew how it would end. Dante sat at the head of the table perfectly still, letting them talk. He'd barely spoken since they'd arrived. Just listen to the escalating suggestions. Grab Ethan, scare him, break something, send a message. The old ways, the easy ways. We can make it look like a robbery, offered Joey Falcone, youngest of the group at 35. Joey handled logistics and transportation. Smart kid, ambitious, always eager to prove himself. Rich kid gets mugged in the wrong neighborhood. Teaches him about respect. Or we burn one of his cars, Tommy added, warming to the theme. That Porsche he drives, gone. Let him explain that to Daddy. The energy in the room was building. These were men of action, men who had grown up in a world where disrespect was answered swiftly and permanently. They understood the language of violence. It was simple, direct, effective. But Dante knew it was also limited, short-sighted. They were thinking tactics. He was thinking strategy. Enough. Dante's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a blade. The room went silent. He stood walking to a whiteboard mounted on the wall. Someone had already taped up printed photos. Ethan Sterling, Richard Sterling, the Riverside Grand Hotel, the Sterling Group logo. Intelligence gathered in just a few hours evidence of the network Dante had built, the eyes and ears he had throughout the city. What do you think happens if we grab Ethan Sterling tonight? Dante said slowly. Tommy frowned. He learns a lesson. No, his father calls the police. The real police, not the ones we know. FBI gets involved because kidnapping crosses state lines. Every camera in Manhattan gets reviewed. Every phone gets tapped. Dante turned to face them. We get heat we don't need over a spoiled kid. So we do nothing. Victor's voice rose with frustration. They humiliate Sophia and we just take it. I didn't say we do nothing. Dante's eyes went cold. I said we don't grab him. This isn't the 90s, Victor. We do not solve problems with baseball bats anymore. Then what? Tommy spread his hands. They already put out that press release calling Sophia unprofessional. They're making her the villain. Every hour we wait, their version becomes the truth. Dante had read the press release a dozen times. Each reading made his jaw tighten more. Sophia had come home at midnight exhausted and gone straight to bed. She still didn't know it had gone public. Didn't know strangers on the internet were debating whether she deserved it. She'd wake up tomorrow to a nightmare, and the Sterlings thought a press release would make it disappear like everything else in their lives that was inconvenient. This isn't about Ethan, Dante said quietly. That got their attention. Richard Sterling is a businessman. He thinks in dollars and contracts. His son humiliated my wife because he's a spoiled brat who's never faced real consequences. But Richard, he saw it happen and did nothing. Then he put out that statement blaming Sophia. Dante's voice hardened. You know why? Because he thinks I need him more than he needs me. He thinks our business arrangement protects him. He thinks I'll swallow this insult to keep the money flowing. Dante's voice hardened. He's wrong. Luca finally spoke from the corner. The Sterling Group has 4 major projects in development right now. Combined value $1.2 billion. He clicked a remote. The whiteboard screen changed to show a spreadsheet. Hudson Yards Residential Tower. Tribeca Mixed-Use Development. Queens Waterfront Condos. Brooklyn Luxury Apartments. Each project a monument to wealth and ambition. Each project entirely dependent on a complex web of suppliers, contractors, permits, and financing that Dante controlled more than Richard knew. Luca highlighted each one. Every single project uses our cement, our trucks, our steel suppliers, our union labor. Understanding dawned on faces around the table. This wasn't about a quick act of revenge. This was about something much bigger. They're also waiting on permits, Luca continued. The Brooklyn project needs environmental clearance. The Queens development needs zoning variances. Both are tied up in city council committees where we have friends. And their financing, Dante asked. 2 primary lenders, Chase and Goldman. Both have short-term construction loans that need to be refinanced in the next 90 days if projects run over schedule. Luca smiled grimly. Which they will if anything goes wrong. Tommy leaned back in his chair, finally getting it. You want to choke their business. I want to dismantle it brick by brick, Dante corrected. Richard Sterling humiliated my wife in public. I'm going to humiliate his empire. How long? Victor asked. 1 week, maybe less. Dante pulled out a marker writing on the whiteboard. Contracts, permits, financing, reputation. These are his pressure points. We squeeze each one systematically. No violence, no obvious connections. Just a series of very unfortunate problems that Richard can't solve. Dante's voice was calm, methodical. This wasn't about hot-blooded revenge. This was surgery, precise and cold. And the kid Ethan, Joey asked. Ethan is a symptom. His father is the disease. Dante capped the marker. But don't worry. When this is over, Ethan Sterling will wish we'd just grabbed him. What's coming is worse than broken bones. The room was silent. This was why Dante Morelli commanded respect. Not just for his willingness to use force, but for his ability to think beyond it. To see patterns others missed. To understand that true power wasn't about violence, it was about control. Control of resources, of information, of perception. He turned back to face his crew. Here's how this works. For the next 24 hours, nobody touches the Sterlings. No threatening calls, no vandalism, nothing. I want everyone focused on intelligence gathering. Victor, I need every detail on their construction timeline. Tommy, talk to your union contacts. Which projects have labor issues we can amplify? Joey, find out who their investors are and what makes them nervous. The men nodded, taking notes. This was familiar territory, gathering information, finding weaknesses, preparing for action. The methods might be different, more subtle than in years past, but the principles remain the same. What about their finances? Victor asked. Luca and I will handle that. Dante checked his watch. We meet again tomorrow night, same time. Come prepared with options, not opinions. We're not street thugs anymore, gentlemen. We're businessmen. He looked around the table, his eyes cold and determined. And we're about to teach the Sterling family what happens when you forget who actually runs this city. The men stood energized now, understanding the plan. This wasn't about revenge, it was about power. About reminding the Sterlings that beneath the glossy surface of New York's real estate empire lay a foundation they didn't control. About teaching them that there were consequences to treating people like Sophia as disposable, as less than human. As they filed out, Tommy paused at the door. Boss, what about Sophia? When do we tell her what we're doing? Dante's expression softened for just a moment. We don't. She's been through enough. When this is over, all she'll know is that the Sterlings apologized. The rest stays between us. Tommy nodded and left. Alone with Luca, Dante pulled out his phone. A text from Sophia. Can't sleep, keep thinking about work. I'm sorry I didn't tell you what happened. So she'd seen the news. His heart ached. Sophia always trying to protect others, always taking responsibility, even when she was the victim. It was one of the reasons he loved her. It was also why she deserved better than what had happened last night. He typed back, nothing to be sorry for, I love you. We'll talk in the morning. Luca watched him. She's going to figure it out eventually. Maybe. Dante pocketed his phone, but by then it'll be over. He straightened his shoulders. Come on, we have debt contracts to review. They turned off the lights and locked the warehouse. Outside, Brooklyn slept oblivious. In Manhattan, Richard Sterling probably slept too confident his press release had contained the damage. Protected by wealth, by privilege, by the assumption that the world would always bend to accommodate him. He had no idea that his empire's foundation was already cracking. The countdown had begun. Day 3 began in a coffee shop in Midtown. Victor Rossi sat across from a city planning clerk named Dennis Wu, an old college friend who owed him favors. They talked about basketball families, the rising cost of rent, casual normal, two friends catching up. By the way, Victor said, sliding an envelope across the table, my daughter's school fundraiser, hoping you can contribute. Dennis peeked inside, $5,000 in cash. His eyes widened, but he didn't hesitate. He'd taken Victor's money before. Of course, happy to help. Appreciate it. Victor pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages. Random question. You still working on that Sterling project in Brooklyn? The Atlantic Plaza expansion? Yeah, still sitting on my desk. Dennis sipped his coffee. Environmental impact review. Could take months. Could it take longer? Dennis met his eyes. Understanding passed between them. Could take 6 months, maybe more if new concerns get raised. That would be unfortunate for them. Very unfortunate. Dennis pocketed the envelope. I'll make sure it gets the thorough review it deserves. Victor nodded and left. One pressure point activated. Across town, Tommy Bergosi stood in a construction trailer at the Hudson Yards Tower site. The project superintendent, Mike Harrion, was a union guy, one of theirs. We got a problem, Tommy. Mike spread blueprints across a folding table. Sterling's behind schedule. They're pushing us to work faster, cut corners. How behind? 6 weeks. They need to pour foundation for the north wing by Friday, or they miss their deadline with the bank. Mike tapped the plans. But here's the thing. The cement order they placed, it's coming from Jersey, not your suppliers. Tommy's jaw tightened. They went around us. Wanted to save money, avoid union rates. Mike shrugged. But that Jersey company, they're having truck problems this week, mechanical issues. Weird how that happens. Tommy smiled. Very weird. And our trucks could deliver, but the order would need to be placed through proper channels, at proper rates. And even then, Mike checked his watch, might take a few extra days to schedule. Shame. Keep me posted on their desperation level. As he left the trailer, Tommy called Dante. Hudson Yards is bleeding time. They're about to miss a critical pour. Good. Let them sweat. In a glass office tower in Lower Manhattan, Luca sat across from Rebecca Morse, a risk analyst at Goldman Sachs. They dated briefly years ago, stayed friendly. She owed him nothing, but she remembered when he'd helped her brother avoid trouble with the wrong people. I need information, Luca said quietly. Sterling Group, what's their situation? Rebecca glanced at her computer screen, conflicted. Luca, I can't just, off the record, old friend asking another old friend. She sighed, typed something. They're leveraged heavily for major projects, all financed with short-term construction loans. The terms require completion milestones every 90 days, or the interest rate jumps 2 points. How close are they to those milestones? Close enough that any delays would be catastrophic. She lowered her voice. Between you and me, Goldman is already nervous. Sterling's last quarterly report showed cost overruns. If these projects stall, we might not refinance, which means they'd need to find new lenders fast. And if they can't, they'd have to liquidate assets, sell properties, possibly declare bankruptcy on the development arm. Rebecca looked at him carefully. Why are you asking? Just curious about the market. Luca stood. Thanks, Rebecca. Give my best to your brother. Outside, he texted Dante. Goldman is wobbly. One more shake, and they bolt. By evening, Dante's team reconvened in the Red Hook warehouse. This time, the whiteboard was covered in details. Project 1, Hudson Yards Residential Tower, value $340 million. Status, 6 weeks behind schedule. Vulnerability, cement supply disrupted. Foundation pour deadline Friday. Bank chase, nervous about timeline. Project 2, Tribeca Mixed-Use Development, value $280 million. Status, waiting on steel delivery. Vulnerability, our steel suppliers can delay shipments indefinitely. Bank Goldman, already anxious about cost overruns. Project 3, Queens Waterfront Condos, value $420 million. Status zoning variance pending. Vulnerability, city council contacts can stall approval for months. Bank Goldman, same loan officer as Tribeca. Project 4, Brooklyn Atlantic Plaza expansion, value $380 million. Status, environmental review. Vulnerability, review process extended to 6+ months. Bank chase, largest exposure to Sterling Group. Dante studied the board like a general surveying a battlefield. Total exposure, $1.4 billion if you count the financing, Luca said. But the actual construction value is $1.2, and it all depends on our cooperation. Victor added his report. The Brooklyn permits are frozen for at least 6 months. I've got 3 different city departments ready to discover new concerns. Traffic impact, historic preservation, wetlands protection. Take your pick. The unions, Dante asked. Ready to walk on 2 projects if negotiations stall. Tommy grinned. All perfectly legal, just workers demanding fair treatment. Joey spoke up. attract their investor calls. Richards had been reassuring people all week that everything's fine, but three small investors already pulled out of the Queen's project. They're spooked by the negative press from the Sophia incident. Good. Dante circled the two bank names on the board. Chase and Goldman, two lenders, four vulnerable projects. He looked at Luca. Can we buy their debt? Working on it. I've got three shell companies ready to purchase distressed construction loans. If the banks get nervous enough, they'll sell at a discount just to reduce exposure. Dante did the math in his head. If they controlled the debt, they controlled oxygen. The Sterlings couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't make deals without going through people they didn't know were connected to Dante. Here's the sequence, Dante said, marker in hand. Tomorrow morning, Hudson Yards misses their foundation pour. Tomorrow afternoon, steel delivery to Tribeca gets delayed. By evening, Sterling will be dealing with two crisis situations. That's when the banks start making worried phone calls. And when they're panicking about timelines, Luca continued, that's when my shell companies approach the banks about buying distressed debt. We swoop in looking like saviors. Victor nodded appreciatively. They won't even know we're behind it. Exactly. Dante kept the marker. Richard Sterling thinks this is about a spoiled kid pouring soda. He doesn't understand he's already losing a war he doesn't know he's fighting. Tommy leaned forward. When does he realize when it's too late? Dante checked his phone. A news alert: Sterling Group stock down 3% on construction concerns. The market was already smelling blood. Gentlemen, we're not just mapping weak points anymore, we're activating them. As of tomorrow morning, the Sterling empire starts crumbling. Slowly enough that they don't panic. Fast enough that they can't stop it. What about Ethan? Joey asked. Kid's still posting on social media like nothing happened. Partying in the Hamptons this weekend. Dante's expression darkened. Let him party. When his father's empire collapses, Ethan will learn that some humiliations can't be fixed with daddy's money. The meeting ended. Men dispersed into the Brooklyn night, each with their assignments. Dante stayed behind, staring at the whiteboard. 4 projects, 2 banks, 1 week. His phone buzzed. Sophia. Can't believe I'm trending on Twitter. People are so cruel, but I'm okay. We're okay. His chest tightened. She was trying to be strong, trying not to worry him. He typed back, you're the strongest person I know. This will pass, I promise. What he didn't say, it will pass because I'm going to make sure the people who hurt you lose everything. Dante turned off the lights. Tomorrow the pressure began. The Sterlings were about to learn that foundations don't just hold up buildings, they hold up empires. And Dante controlled every single one. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Richard Sterling fumbled for his phone, squinting at the screen. Project manager Hudson Yards. He sat up in bed, his wife groaning beside him. This better be important, Mike. Mr. Sterling, we have a problem. The superintendent's voice was tight. The cement trucks didn't show up. Richard's brain struggled through sleep fog. What do you mean didn't show up? We have a critical pour scheduled for 600 a.m. I know, sir, but the Jersey supplier called an hour ago, said their entire fleet is down for emergency maintenance. Transmission failures across multiple trucks. They can't deliver. All of them at once. Richard was fully awake now, alarm bells ringing. That's impossible. That's what I said, but they're adamant. Earliest they can deliver is next week. Next week, Richard threw off the covers, pacing. If we miss this pour, we miss our milestone. Chase will trigger the penalty clause. That's $2 million. I'm aware, sir. All our backup suppliers, someone in this city has cement trucks. I've been calling for an hour. Mike's voice carried defeat. Everyone's booked solid or having equipment issues. It's like the whole supply chain picked tonight to fall apart. Richard's stomach nodded. Keep trying. Offer double rates, triple, I don't care. We cannot miss that deadline. He hung up and immediately dialed his COO, then his head of operations. Within 20 minutes, his entire executive team was awake, making calls, pulling strings. Nobody could help. At 6:30 a.m., the Hudson Yards site sat silent. No cement trucks, no pour, just union workers standing around collecting hourly wages for doing nothing. At 7:15 a.m., Richard's phone rang again. Tribeca project manager. Please tell me you have good news, Richard said. Steel delivery is delayed. Supplier says there's a traffic accident blocking their route. They'll try again tomorrow. Tomorrow we're already behind schedule. I know, sir. I'm as frustrated as you are. Richard ended the call and threw his phone across his home office. It bounced off the leather couch. 2 projects. Same morning. Both critical delays. This wasn't coincidence. By 9:00 a.m., Richard sat in his Sterling Group headquarters, a glass tower in Midtown with views of Central Park. His executive team filled the conference room, tired, confused, and increasingly nervous. Talk to me, Richard demanded. What the hell is happening? His COO, Patricia Vance, pulled up a spreadsheet. Hudson Yards cement supplier claims mechanical failure across their fleet. Tribeca steel delivery blocked by a mysterious traffic incident. She looked up. But here's what's weird. I called other developers. Nobody else is having supply problems. Just us. Just us, Richard said flatly. His CFO, Martin Ross, cleared his throat. The timing is unfortunate. Chase called this morning. They're aware of the Hudson Yards delay. If we don't pour foundation by Friday, the penalty clause activates. That's $2 million. Plus, they're considering raising our interest rate. On what grounds? Failure to meet milestone deadlines. It's in the contract. Richard's jaw clenched. One delay, and they're panicking. It's not just the delay, Martin pulled up his laptop. Our stock dropped 3% yesterday after that waitress incident went viral. Investors are jittery. Chase is asking if we're experiencing broader operational problems. The waitress incident. Sofia Ramirez. Richard had hoped his press release would contain that situation. Instead, it had exploded. Think pieces about wealth inequality, social media outrage, his son's face plastered across gossip sites. And now this. Get me new suppliers, Richard said. I don't care what it costs. We're trying, Patricia said. But every contractor we've contacted is either booked or... She hesitated. Or what? Or giving us the runaround. Quotes that are 3 times normal rates. Delivery windows that don't help. She met his eyes. It's like someone's poisoned the well. Richard stood walking to the window. 43 floors below Manhattan buzzed with construction cranes and traffic. His city, his empire. Someone was doing this. Someone with enough reach to disrupt supply chains, enough power to coordinate attacks on multiple projects simultaneously. But who at noon? Ethan Sterling sat in a Hamptons beach club, mimosa in hand, laughing with friends. The summer sun sparkled off the Atlantic. Life was good. Dude, you're trending again, his buddy Chase said, scrolling through his phone. People are still talking about the waitress thing. Ethan rolled his eyes. It was a joke. People need to chill. Your dad's press release didn't help. Made it worse, actually. Dad knows what he's doing. Ethan waved a hand dismissively. By next week, nobody will remember her name. His phone buzzed. Dad calling again? Ethan declined the call. He'd already listened to one lecture this morning about family reputation and being more careful. He didn't need another. Everything cool? Chase asked. Fine, just Dad stressing about work stuff. Ethan signaled for another mimosa. Nothing he needed to worry about. What Ethan didn't know, what his father was frantically trying to tell him, was that Sterling Group stock had dropped another 2% by lunch. That 2 major investors were requesting emergency calls. That rumors were starting to circulate about operational instability. The empire wasn't just stressed, it was showing cracks. By 4:00 p.m., Richard had made 17 calls. Every supplier gave him the same story. Backed up equipment, issues with scheduling. Some apologized profusely, others were oddly curt. He sat alone in his office staring at project timelines that were quickly becoming fantasies. His assistant knocked. Mr. Sterling, Goldman Sachs on line 3. They're asking about the Tribeca and Queens projects. Goldman, his other major lender. Richard picked up. James, good to hear from you. James Rothman's voice was professional but cool. I wanted to touch base about your projects. We're hearing some concerning reports about delays. Minor setbacks, we're addressing them. Minor setbacks that are affecting 2 projects simultaneously. A pause. Our risk assessment team is getting nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about. We have the situation under control. Do you buy? Another pause. Because our analysts are also looking at the negative publicity from earlier this week. Combined with these construction delays, it's creating a concerning pattern. Richard's hand tightened on the phone. James, we've worked together for 10 years. When have I ever failed to deliver? There's a first time for everything. James's voice softened slightly. Look, I'm not making threats. I'm giving you a friendly heads up. If these delays continue, if more problems emerge, Goldman will need to reassess our position. We have shareholders to answer to. I understand. I hope you do. Fix this, Richard. Quickly. The line went dead. Richard sat in silence, his reflection staring back from the dark computer screen. Two banks circling, two projects stalled, investors panicking, stock dropping. 48 hours ago, everything had been fine. Now it felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. He thought about Sofia Ramirez, the waitress, the video that wouldn't die. Could this be connected? Some kind of retaliation? No. Impossible. She was nobody. A restaurant worker. What could she possibly do to hurt him? He shook off the paranoia. This was just bad luck. Terrible timing. It would pass. Richard pulled up his contacts, started making more calls. There had to be someone who could deliver cement. Someone who owed him a favor. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't see, was that every call he made, every favor he tried to pull, every string he attempted to pull, was connected to a web that all led back to one man. A man whose wife had been humiliated on camera while Richard stood by and did nothing. A man who was just getting started. In Brooklyn, Dante received updates throughout the day. Each one made him smile. Hudson Yards stalled. Tribeca stalled. Both banks circling, stock down 5% total. He looked at Luca. Tomorrow we tighten the noose. The war had begun, and Richard Sterling was losing without even knowing he was fighting. Day 4 started with a phone call Richard never expected. Mr. Sterling, this is Diane Moore from the Department of Environmental Protection. The voice was polite, bureaucratic, deadly. I'm calling about your Queens waterfront project. Richard's stomach dropped. Another problem. What about it? We've received concerns regarding potential wetland disturbance. We'll need to conduct an additional environmental impact assessment before we can approve your zoning variance. We already passed environmental review months ago. New information has come to light. Possible habitat for protected bird species. We take these matters very seriously. How long will this take? Hard to say. Could be 60 to 90 days. Maybe longer if we find issues. 90 days. The Queens project was supposed to break ground in 3 weeks. Goldman was already nervous about Tribeca. Now this. This is ridiculous, Richard said, trying to keep his voice level. Who raised these concerns? Anonymous tip to our office, but we're obligated to investigate all credible reports. Diane's tone suggested the conversation was over. You'll receive official notification by end of business today. She hung up. Richard stared at his phone. Anonymous tip, just like the cement trucks mysteriously failing. Just like the steel deliveries getting delayed. Just like everything else falling apart this week. This wasn't coincidence. Someone was orchestrating this. By 10:00 a.m., the rumor started. It began on Urban Development Watch, a niche blog that covered New York real estate. A post titled, "Sterling Group Projects Face Multiple Delays, What's Really Going On?" The article was careful, avoiding direct accusations, but it asked uncomfortable questions. Sources close to several Sterling Group construction sites report unusual delays this week. Cement suppliers, steel deliveries, and now permit issues. While each incident appears isolated, industry insiders are wondering if there's a deeper problem. Some point to the viral video of Ethan Sterling's behavior at last week's charity gala as evidence of a company culture problem. Others suggest possible financial instability. By noon, the story had been picked up by 3 other real estate blogs. By 2:00 p.m., the New York Post real estate section ran a brief item, "Sterling Group Faces Construction Headaches." By 4:00 p.m., Richard's investor line was ringing off the hook. "Richard, what's going on?" Marcus Zhang, a Hong Kong investor with $30 million in the Tribeca project, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm reading about permit problems, supply chain issues. Should I be concerned?" "Absolutely not. Just some unfortunate timing." "Unfortunate timing? I put serious money into this development based on your timeline. Now I'm hearing it could be delayed months. We're working through some temporary setbacks. The same week your son becomes a viral villain, the same week your stock drops 5%. Forgive me for seeing a pattern." Richard's jaw clenched. Marcus, I've never missed a deadline with you, have I? There's always a first time. I want a call tomorrow with concrete answers, not promises. The line went dead. 3 more calls followed. Different investors, same anxiety. Everyone wanted reassurance Richard couldn't provide because he didn't understand what was happening. Patricia Vance knocked on Richard's office door at 5:00 p.m., her face grim. More bad news. City Council postponed the vote on the Brooklyn Atlantic Plaza variance, said they need more time to review community feedback. Community feedback. We addressed all their concerns months ago. Apparently new concerns have emerged. Traffic studies, historic preservation. A council member is calling for a full public hearing. Patricia sat down heavily. Richard, something's wrong. This isn't normal bureaucratic delay. It's coordinated. Richard had been thinking the same thing all day. Who has this kind of reach? Who can disrupt supply chains, influence city permits, and plant stories in real estate blogs simultaneously? Someone with serious power, Patricia paused. Someone we pissed off. Richard's mind raced through possibilities. A competitor. A rival developer. But this felt personal, not just business. The waitress, Sofia Ramirez, the woman from the video. Do we know anything about her? Richard said slowly. The woman from the video, Patricia pulled up her tablet. Sofia Ramirez, 32, works at Riverside Grand. Been there 6 years, lives in Brooklyn, married. She scrolled. Husband is Dante Morelli, listed occupation construction contractor. Construction. Richard's blood went cold. What kind of contractor? Patricia tapped more. Doesn't specify, but she stopped, her face going pale. Richard, that name sounds familiar. From where your shell company contracts, the ones that source cement and steel at below market rates. Didn't we sign papers with a Morelli construction group 3 years ago? Richard's hands started shaking. He pulled up his private files, the ones his lawyer handled, the contracts he never looked at too closely because they saved him millions. There it was, Morelli Construction Group. Dante Morelli, principal. The man whose wife Ethan had humiliated was Richard's secret business partner. The man who controlled the supply chain that all 4 Sterling projects depended on. Oh God, Richard whispered. Patricia stared at him. What? I need to make a call. Richard's voice was hollow. Get out. Now. She left, closing the door. Richard's fingers trembled as he scrolled through his contacts. There, the private number he'd used only twice before. The direct line to Dante Morelli's office. He pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. You've reached Morelli Construction. Leave a message. Voicemail. But Richard knew Dante had to be there. Had to be watching this number. Dante, it's Richard Sterling. I think we need to talk about recent developments. Call me back, please. He hung up and waited. 5 minutes, 10:20. No call back. Richard tried again. Voicemail, and again. Voicemail. The message was clear. Dante Morelli wasn't taking his calls. At 7:00 p.m., Richard sat alone in his office, the city lights twinkling below. His empire, built over 30 years, was shaking. Stock down 7% now. 2 banks getting nervous. Investors demanding answers. Projects stalled. All because his idiot son poured soda on a waitress. No. All because Richard had stood there and watched it happen. All because he'd released that press statement blaming her. All because he'd assumed the woman was nobody, powerless, someone who could be crushed without consequence. He'd been catastrophically wrong. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop calling. You'll get your meeting when I'm ready, not before. Richard's hands trembled as he typed back. I can explain. Let me fix this. The response came immediately. You can't fix humiliation with a phone call, Richard. You should know that by now. Then nothing. The number went dark. Richard sat in the silence of his office, understanding finally settling over him like a burial shroud. Dante Morelli wasn't just angry. He wasn't looking for an apology or a payoff. He was systematically destroying everything Richard had built. And Richard had given him the blueprint 3 years ago when they became partners. Outside night fell over Manhattan. In the glass buildings and construction sites and city offices, the pieces of Dante's plan continued to fall into place. The noose was tightening, and Richard Sterling had just realized his neck was in it. Richard's emergency board meeting began at 8:00 p.m. in the Sterling Group's executive conference room. 12 people sat around polished mahogany. Lawyers, executives, board members. All of them looked exhausted. "We're being targeted," Richard said without preamble. "Systematically, deliberately, and I know by whom." He told them about Dante Morelli, about the shell companies, about Sofia Ramirez, about the connection he'd been too blind to see. His head counsel, Gerald Strauss, went pale. "You're saying our primary supplier is married to the woman in the video." "I'm saying our primary supplier is the woman's husband, and he's been cutting off our air supply since Tuesday." "Then we sue him," Patricia said. "Breach of contract, tortious interference. We bury him in litigation." Gerald held up a hand. "Wait, let me pull those contracts." He spent 5 minutes on his laptop, his expression growing darker. Finally, he looked up. "We can't sue." "What do you mean we can't sue?" Richard's voice rose. "He's deliberately sabotaging our projects." "Technically, he isn't. Morelli Construction Group doesn't directly supply us. They supply the suppliers who supply us. The contracts are structured through intermediaries. Very carefully structured." Gerald's finger traced connections on his screen. "If we sue, we'd have to explain these shell company arrangements in court. That means exposing financial structures we've used to avoid taxes and regulatory oversight for 3 years." Silence. "How bad?" Patricia asked quietly. "Federal investigation? Bad IRS audit? Bad. Possibly RICO charges? Bad." Gerald removed his glasses. "These contracts were designed for plausible deniability. They work great when everyone's cooperating, but if we sue, we're essentially revealing our own illegal financial engineering." Richard felt the walls closing in. "So we just let him destroy us?" "I'm saying litigation isn't an option. At least not against Morelli directly." Gerald thought for a moment. "What about City Hall? Can we pressure the permit offices to speed things up?" Patricia shook her head. "Already tried. Called in every favor. Everyone's suddenly unable to help. Either they're genuinely backlogged or someone's gotten to them first." "Someone named Morelli," Richard muttered. Martin, the CFO, cleared his throat. "There's another problem. Goldman called again this afternoon. They're conducting a routine review of our loan portfolio. Translation, they're looking for reasons to call our loans early or trigger penalty clauses." "Can they do that if we miss contracted milestones?" "Yes. Hudson Yards missed its foundation deadline. Tribeca is 3 weeks behind. If the Queens project gets delayed 60 days because of this environmental review, we'll miss that deadline too." Martin pulled up a spreadsheet. 3 missed milestones triggers a review clause. "We need to refinance immediately or face default." "How much are we talking about?" $420 million due in 30 days if they invoke the clause. The number hung in the air like a bomb. "We don't have that kind of liquidity," Patricia said. "I know." Richard stood pacing to the window. $420 million. They could maybe scrape together half by selling non-core assets, but the other half, we could bring in new investors, someone suggested, with our stock down 7% and construction delays making headlines. Martin shook his head. "No major investor will touch us right now, not at terms we could accept." "Then we go back to Morelli, Bauman," Richard said. "Make him an offer. Money ownership, stake whatever he wants." "He's not answering your calls," Patricia pointed out. "Then I'll go to him, to his office, his home, wherever he is. I'll find him." "And then what?" Gerald interrupted. "Apologize, beg. He's not doing this for money, Richard. He's doing this because your son humiliated his wife and you backed Ethan instead of making it right." Richard turned on him. "What was I supposed to do? Throw my own son under the bus?" "Yes," Patricia's voice cracked through the room. "That's exactly what you should have done. Issue a real apology. Fire Ethan from his position. Make it clear that behavior was unacceptable. Instead, you blame the victim and assume no one would care about a waitress. I didn't know who she was married to. That shouldn't have mattered." Patricia stood furious. "Even if she'd been married to nobody, what Ethan did was wrong. But you were more worried about protecting the family name than doing the right thing. Now we're all paying for it." Silence fell. No one looked at Richard. Across town, Ethan Sterling sat in a booth at a trendy Soho nightclub. Bottle service on the table models on either side of him. His phone had been buzzing all evening. Dad, Patricia, Martin. But he ignored them. Your dad's blowing up your phone, his friend Tyler observed. Always is. Ethan took a shot. Probably wants to lecture me more about the video, like I need another speech about family reputation. Dude, have you seen the news? Your company's stock is tanking. Stock goes up, stock goes down. Ethan waved dismissively. Dad always figures it out. That's what he does. What Ethan didn't see, what he was too drunk and too privileged to notice, was that his father was standing on the edge of a financial cliff, that 4 major construction projects were grinding to a halt, that banks were circling investors demanding answers, the family empire experiencing the first real crisis in its history. All because Ethan had thought it would be funny to pour Coca-Cola on a waitress. Back in the conference room, Richard's phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Your lawyers are probably telling you that you can't sue me. They're right. Your politicians are probably not returning calls. Also correct. You built your empire on my foundation, Richard. I can remove it brick by brick. The question is, how much do you want to lose before you're ready to talk? Richard stared at the message, his reflection ghostly in the phone screen. Gerald leaned over. Is that him? Richard nodded. What does he want? He wants me to suffer, to understand what it feels like to be powerless. Richard's voice was hollow. He wants me to beg. Then maybe you should, Patricia said quietly, before there's nothing left to save. Richard looked around the table at the tired faces, the fear in their eyes. These people had families, mortgages, careers tied to Sterling Group. If the company collapsed, they all went down. He thought about Ethan drunk in some club oblivious. He thought about Sofia Ramirez, the woman he dismissed as nobody. He thought about the press release he'd authorized, the one that blamed her for being unprofessional. Patricia was right. He'd made the wrong choice at every turn. And now the bill was coming due. Set up a meeting, Richard said finally, with Morelli, whatever it takes. He's not answering. Then send a message through his office. Tell him, Richard paused, the words bitter on his tongue. Tell him Richard Sterling is ready to apologize properly this time. Gerald nodded and left to make the call. Richard sat down heavily, suddenly feeling every one of his 58 years. In 4 days, his empire had gone from thriving to life support, and the man holding the plug is someone he'd never even considered a threat. His phone buzzed one more time. Tomorrow, 10:00 a.m., 8:47, with Avenue, Brooklyn. Come alone, bring your son. Richard closed his eyes. The war was over. Now came the surrender. As Richard's team frantically worked through the night, Don Castellano sat in his favorite Italian restaurant in Little Italy sipping espresso. At 72, he was one of the last old-school Mafia dons in the city, semi-retired now but still connected. He'd been watching the Sterling Group implosion with interest. His phone rang. Don Castellano, Carlo Genovese here. Carlo, leader of one of the few remaining rival families to the Morelli operation. Young, ambitious, ruthless. Carlo, to what do I owe the pleasure? I'm hearing interesting things about Dante Morelli in the Sterling Group. Seems he's taking them down. Word travels fast. It always does. A pause. I'm thinking about making a move. The Sterling properties would be valuable acquisitions if their development stalls. And Morelli's distracted. Don Castellano sipped his espresso. Careful, Carlo. Dante Morelli isn't someone you want to underestimate. I'm not underestimating. I have someone inside his organization, feeding me information. That was news. Who? Better you don't know, but they tell me Morelli's meeting with Sterling tomorrow, negotiating terms. And you're thinking of interrupting. I'm thinking of offering Sterling an alternative. My resources could solve his problems just as easily as Morelli's. It's risky. High risk, high reward, Don. That's always been my philosophy. Don Castellano set down his cup. Do what you think is best, Carlo. But remember, Morelli built his empire carefully, patiently. That kind of man doesn't lose easily. We'll see. Good night, Don. The line went dead. Don Castellano signaled for the check. This was getting interesting. 3 decades in this business had taught him to recognize the signs of an impending power shift. Someone would emerge stronger from this conflict. Someone would be diminished, perhaps destroyed. The only question was who. and whether the fallout would create opportunities for others. In a rundown apartment in Queens, Joey Falcone paced nervously. His phone lay on the coffee table, the number for Carlo Genovese displayed on the screen. Joey had been with Dante for 8 years. Started as a driver, worked his way up to running logistics. But he'd hit a ceiling. Twice he'd asked Dante for a larger territory, a bigger piece. Twice he'd been told to wait his turn. Carlo Genovese had offered him a capo position. Real power, real money. All he had to do was provide information on Dante's plans for Sterling. It wasn't personal, just business. Everyone looked out for themselves in this life. Joey picked up the phone and made the call. "It's me. I've got something. Morelli's meeting Sterling tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. His Red Hook warehouse. He's going to make Sterling sign over 15% of the Hudson Yards project." "Good work," Carlo's voice purred. "Any security?" "Just Luca and maybe Tommy." "Perfect. Keep me updated if anything changes. Your future looks bright with us, Joey." Joey hung up, guilt and excitement warring in his stomach. He'd crossed a line. No going back now. He didn't know that Carlo was already calling his captains, assembling a team. Didn't know that Carlo saw this not just as a chance to acquire valuable Sterling assets, but to eliminate a rival in the process. Two birds, one stone. The wheels were turning. A new player had entered the game, and what had been a controlled demolition of the Sterling empire was about to become something much more volatile. In their Brooklyn brownstone, Dante and Sophia sat at the kitchen table. Sophia was scrolling through her phone, reading comments on the viral video that had changed their lives. "Look at this one," she said, showing Dante. "Some woman from Seattle started a GoFundMe for the Coca-Cola waitress. It's already at $22,000. "People are kind," Dante said neutrally. "It's strange having strangers defend you." Sophia set down her phone. "But the hate is there too, people saying I must have provoked him, that I'm trying to capitalize on it. Does that bother you?" "Less than I thought it would." She looked at him. "I keep thinking about what you said when we met. Remember at your cousin's wedding?" Dante smiled. "I said a lot of things that night. I was trying to impress you. You said the people who can hurt you are the ones who matter. The rest are just noise." Sophia took his hand. "It's true, the only opinions that hurt were from people I thought would stand up for me. My manager, the other guests who saw it happen, the Sterling family blaming me." Dante squeezed her hand. "Tomorrow things will change." "What do you mean, just a feeling?" He changed the subject. "How's the restaurant idea coming? Still thinking Italian fusion?" Sophia's eyes lit up as they always did when discussing her dream. "Maybe, but I'm also considering something more traditional. Recipes from my nonna, your mother. Simple food made with love. Wherever you decide to open, it'll be the best restaurant in Brooklyn. One day, when we save enough." Dante nodded, not letting his face reveal that he already owned a perfect corner building 2 neighborhoods over. That architects had drawn up plans for Sophia's months ago. That it would be her birthday gift when all this was settled. Instead, he just listened as she talked about menu ideas and decoration themes. Her passion, her creativity, these were the things he loved most about her. The qualities that someone like Ethan Sterling would never recognize in a woman he saw as merely a servant. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Sterlings would learn what it meant to have real power used against them. And Sophia would learn that dreams sometimes come true faster than expected. But tonight, they were just a married couple discussing the future over a late dinner. For a few more hours at least, that was enough. Day 5. Luca Romano sat in a diner in Queens across from 3 men in suits. They looked like what they were, investment bankers, eager to offload risk before anyone asked questions. "Let me get this straight," said Michael Chun from Chase. "You want to buy Sterling Group's construction debt now, when everyone knows they're having problems?" "That's exactly when we buy," Luca said calmly. "My clients specialize in distressed assets. We see opportunity where others see risk. Your clients being Sentinel Capital Partners. Private equity, very quiet, very well funded." Luca slid paperwork across the table. All legitimate, all traceable to a Cayman Island shell company that existed only on paper. "We're prepared to purchase the Hudson Yards and Brooklyn debt at 90 cents on the dollar. Today." Michael and his Goldman counterpart Lisa Park exchanged glances. The debt was worth $180 million total. At 90 cents, they'd take a small loss but eliminate exposure to a potentially catastrophic situation. Why so eager? Lisa asked suspiciously. Because in 3 months, when sterling stabilizes, that debt will be worth full value again. We're patient. Luca smiled. We're also confident they'll recover, but we need an answer by noon. After that, the offer expires. It was a lie. Dante didn't think sterling would recover. But these bankers didn't need to know that. Michael checked his phone, probably messaging his boss. We'll need to review. No time for a review, noon deadline. Take it or keep riding the sterling sinking ship. Luca stood. My number's on the card. Call me when you decide. He left them staring at the paperwork. By 9:30 a.m., Luca had met with 2 more groups. Same pitch, same tight deadline, same barely concealed desperation from the bankers. By 10:15 a.m., his phone started ringing. Chase agreed first. 90 cents on the dollar for the Hudson Yards debt. $85 million changing hands by wire transfer before lunch. Goldman followed at 10:47. The Tribeca and partial Queens debt. Another $95 million. A smaller regional bank holding Brooklyn project financing called at 11:20. They were so eager to dump their exposure, they accepted 85 cents on the dollar. 48 million. By noon, Dante's network of shell companies controlled 228 million in sterling group debt, roughly 35% of their total outstanding construction financing. Luca called Dante from his car. It's done. We own them. Good. Now we wait. Richard's phone rang at 1:15 p.m. His banker at Chase, Robert Crawford, sounded uncomfortable. Richard, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. What now? Richard's voice was flat. He'd barely slept. We sold your Hudson Yards debt this morning to a private equity firm called Sentinel Capital Partners. Richard sat up straight. You what? It's standard practice. Banks regularly sell construction debt to manage portfolio risk. I wanted you to know because technically your primary lender has changed. Who are these people? Sentinel Capital. They're a private firm, offshore registration. They specialize in distressed assets. We're not distressed. Robert's pause said everything. Your stock is down 9 miles. 3 projects are stalled. The press is asking questions. From our perspective, selling that debt was prudent risk management. How much of our debt did you sell? Just the Hudson Yards project. 85 million. Richard's hands went cold. Who else is selling? I can't speak for other banks. Robert, who else? You should probably call Goldman. Richard hung up and immediately dialed Lisa Park at Goldman Sachs. We were going to call you, Lisa said, defensive. Market conditions made it necessary. How much? The Tribeca debt and part of the Queen's financing. $95 million total. To whom? To this Sentinel Capital and a few other entities. Look, this is completely normal. Banks sell debt all the time. Not all at once, they don't. Not when a developer is in the middle of multiple projects. Richard was shouting now. You're bailing on me after 10 years. We're managing risk. There's a difference. I've been with Goldman for 10 years, and we hope for 10 more. But recent developments made this necessary. She didn't sound sorry. She sounded relieved. Your new lenders will contact you about payment processing. The line went dead. Richard sat in his office, his hands shaking. In one morning, 2 major banks had sold his debt to mysterious entities. That never happened unless someone was buying it, someone who wanted leverage. His phone buzzed. Martin, his CFO, calling. Tell me you heard, Richard said. I heard. It's worse than you think. Regional Trust Bank also sold our Brooklyn debt. That's 3 banks, Richard. $228 million in debt changing hands in one morning. To who? Different entities. Sentinel Capital Partners, Hudson Investment Group, Riverside Holdings, all private equity, all offshore. Martin's voice cracked. Richard, I can't find anything. No track records, no public filings, no history. It's like they didn't exist until this week. Richard's blood turned to ice. They're shell companies. That's my guess, all controlled by the same person probably. Morelli. Richard stood, walked to his window. Below, construction cranes dotted the skyline. His projects, his legacy. Except they weren't really his anymore. Not if Dante Morelli controlled the debt. What can he do with that debt? Richard asked quietly. Anything he wants. He can call it early if we miss milestones. He can demand immediate payment. He can force us into bankruptcy and pick up our assets in liquidation. Martin paused. Richard, in 48 hours, he went from supplier to creditor. He doesn't just control our supply chain, he controls our financing. We can't move without his permission. The full scope of Dante's strategy hit Richard like a physical blow. This wasn't just about revenge, it was a hostile takeover executed with surgical precision. Disrupt the projects, tank the stock panic, the banks buy the debt cheap, control the empire. How do we fight this? Richard asked. We don't. We can't. Not without destroying ourselves in the process. He's already won, Richard realized aloud. The question now is, what terms he'll offer. His phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Check your bank accounts. Notice anything different. That's what powerless feels like. See you tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. Address to follow. Come alone. Bring your son. Bring your son. So this wasn't just about Richard. Ethan would have to face the consequences too. Richard forwarded the message to Ethan with 3 words, be there, no excuses. Then he collapsed into his chair and stared at the ceiling. In 4 days, Dante Morelli had done what Richard thought impossible. He'd taken a billion-dollar empire and reduced it to a puppet whose strings he now controlled. All because of a glass of Coca-Cola. All because Richard had forgotten a fundamental truth. In New York City, the men who build the foundations hold all the power, and Richard had just learned exactly how much. 847. With Avenue was not what Richard expected. No gleaming office tower, no marble lobby, just a plain brick building in Brooklyn with a faded sign reading, Morelli Construction Supply. A few trucks parked outside, windows that needed cleaning. This was the empire that had brought down Sterling Group. Richard and Ethan arrived at 9:55 a.m. in Richard's Mercedes. They'd barely spoken during the drive. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept, his usual confidence replaced by visible dread. Let me do the talking, Richard said as they got out. I wasn't planning to say anything. A man in his 40s met them at the door. Compact build, watchful eyes. Mr. Sterling, I'm Luca Romano. Follow me. They walked through a warehouse filled with construction equipment, then up a metal staircase to a second-floor office. Plain walls, metal desk, filing cabinets, a single window overlooking the loading dock. And sitting behind the desk in jeans and a work shirt was Dante Morelli. He looked nothing like Richard expected. No expensive suit, no intimidating presence. Just a man who could have been any construction foreman in the city, except for his eyes. Dark, intelligent, and utterly calm. The eyes of a man who didn't need to intimidate because he already had all the power. Sit, Dante said. Richard and Ethan sat in the 2 chairs facing the desk. Luca stood by the door, arms crossed. Dante studied them for a long moment, saying nothing. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Thank you for meeting with us, Richard began. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Dante's voice was quiet, precise. Your son poured Coca-Cola on my wife's head. You watched it happen and said nothing. Then you released a press statement blaming her. I understand perfectly. That statement was a mistake. We were trying to control. You were trying to make it her fault, make it go away, like she didn't matter. Dante leaned forward slightly. Do you know what Sophia did that night after your son humiliated her? She came home and told me work was fine. She lied to protect me. To protect you, Richard was genuinely confused, because she was afraid of what might happen if I knew. Richard said nothing. What could he say? She's worked at that hotel for 6 years, never missed a shift, never complained. She's proud of what she does. Dante's voice remained even. And your son treated her like garbage for entertainment. Ethan found his voice. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. You're always drunk. You're always not thinking. Dante's eyes shifted to Ethan. I know about the DUIs, the harassment complaints, the settlements. You've gone through life believing your money makes you untouchable. Today you learn different. Mr. Morelli, Richard interjected, we want to make this right. Whatever you need, compensation, a public apology. I don't need anything from you. Dante stood walking to the window. In 4 days, I've taken your empire to the edge of collapse. Your stock is down 11%. Your projects are stalled. Your bank sold your debt to me. Right now, I own 35% of your financial oxygen. He turned back to face them. I could keep going, call your loans early, trigger default clauses, watch you declare bankruptcy, then buy your assets in liquidation for pennies on the dollar. Dante's expression didn't change. But that's not what I want. What do you want? Richard asked quietly. I want you to understand something. Dante returned to his desk, sitting down. You build towers, luxury apartments, places rich people live, but you don't build them. Men like me do. We pour the concrete, lay the steel wire, the electricity. Without us, you have nothing but blueprints and investor meetings. He paused. You forgot that. Forgot that the people who actually build your empire matter. So I reminded you. Richard nodded slowly. You made your point. We understand. Good. Then here are my terms. Dante pulled out a single sheet of paper. Non-negotiable. He slid it across the desk. Richard read, his face going pale. Ethan leaned over to look. First, Dante said, public apology, televised, both of you, to Sophia, acknowledging what happened and taking full responsibility. No qualifications. Your PR team will coordinate with mine. Agreed, Richard said immediately. Second, $50 million donated to the Hospitality Workers Relief Fund, a charity that supports restaurant workers dealing with abuse and harassment. The donation happens before the press conference. Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Done. Third, 15% ownership stake in your Hudson Yards tower, transferred to one of my investment entities. Non-voting shares, but I want a piece of what I helped you build. That's worth, Ethan started. $80 million, Dante finished. I know. Consider it payment for the empire I let you keep. Richard closed his eyes. $80 million plus $50 million in charity. $130 million total. But the alternative was losing everything. Acceptable, Richard said hoarsely. Fourth, Dante's eyes locked on Ethan. You disappear. No more public events. No more parties that end up on social media. No more representing Sterling Group at functions. You become invisible. For how long? Ethan asked. Until I say otherwise. Could be a year, could be fun. You'll work in the company, but behind the scenes. No press. No more chances to embarrass your family. Ethan's face flushed red. You can't. I can, and I am. Dante's voice never rose. You wanted to humiliate someone for fun. Now you learn what real humiliation feels like. Being reduced to nothing. Being invisible. Ethan, Richard's voice was sharp. Agree. Dad, agree or we lose everything. Ethan stared at the desk, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, barely audible. Fine. Dante pulled out 4 copies of a contract. These formalize everything. Sign them. Richard picked up a pen, his hand trembling slightly. He signed all 4 copies. Ethan followed his signature, angry and jagged. Dante signed last, then handed 2 copies back. The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow noon. My office will send details. The donation needs to clear by tonight. It will, Richard promised. Dante stood. The meeting was over. One more thing, Dante said as they reached the door. Sophia doesn't know I did this. She doesn't know about our business relationship or what I'm capable of. She thinks I'm just a contractor who got lucky. I want to keep it that way. We won't say anything, Richard said. Good. Dante's expression softened slightly. She's a good person, better than any of us in this room. What you did to her was unforgivable, but I'm giving you a chance to make it right publicly. Don't waste it. Richard nodded, unable to speak. They left, walking through the warehouse, climbing into the Mercedes, driving away from the plain brick building where their empire had been saved at the cost of their pride. 130 million, Ethan said finally, for spilling a drink. No, Richard's voice was hollow, for forgetting that other people matter, that actions have consequences, that money doesn't protect you from everything. They drove back to Manhattan in silence. Behind them in his office, Dante made a phone call. It's done, he told Luca. Press conference tomorrow. After that, we release the supply chains. Let their projects continue. The debt, we keep it. Insurance policy, they step out of line again, we crush them. Dante hung up and looked at Sophia's picture on his desk. Tomorrow she'd see justice, public televised justice, and she'd never know the war he'd fought to get it. The Sterling Group press conference was scheduled for noon at their Manhattan headquarters. By 11:30, the lobby was packed with reporters. This was unusual. Press conferences about corporate apologies didn't draw CNN, MSNBC, and every major newspaper in the city. But the Sofia Ramirez story had touched a nerve. Wealth inequality, workplace abuse, viral justice. Everyone wanted to see how this ended. Sophia sat in her apartment in Brooklyn, watching the live stream on her laptop. Dante had called that morning. Watch the news at noon, trust me. She'd been confused but curious. Now seeing the Sterling Group logo on screen, her stomach knotted. The press room filled, cameras clicked, reporters murmured. Then Richard and Ethan Sterling walked in. They looked nothing like the confident billionaires from the gala photos. Richard's face was drawn gray. Ethan's usual smirk was gone, replaced by obvious discomfort. They took seats at a table with microphones. No PR team flanking them. No lawyers whispering advice. Just two men alone facing consequences. Richard cleared his throat. Thank you for coming. We called this press conference to address an incident that occurred last week at a charity gala. He paused, collecting himself. My son Ethan poured a beverage on a waitress named Sofia Ramirez. He did this deliberately while others laughed and recorded. I was present. I saw it happen, and I did nothing to stop it. The room was silent except for camera shutters. Following the incident, our company released a statement suggesting Ms. Ramirez had behaved unprofessionally. That statement was false. Ms. Ramirez did nothing wrong. She was simply doing her job when my son decided to humiliate her for entertainment. Richard's voice cracked slightly. What my son did was deplorable. What I did standing by then blaming the victim was equally deplorable. We allowed our wealth and privilege to convince us that other people's dignity didn't matter. We were catastrophically wrong. He turned to the camera, looking directly into it. Ms. Ramirez, I am profoundly sorry. You deserved respect, dignity, and basic human decency. Instead, you received cruelty and injustice. There is no excuse for what happened to you, none. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Richard nodded at him. Ethan leaned toward his microphone. For a moment, Sophia thought he might refuse to speak, then quietly, I was drunk, but that's not an excuse. I humiliated you because I thought it was funny, because I've gone through life treating people as entertainment, as things that don't matter. His voice was tight, fighting emotion. What I did to you is wrong, completely wrong, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. A reporter raised her hand. Are you apologizing because you want to, or because your company is facing financial difficulties? Richard didn't hesitate. Both. Our company has suffered consequences for our behavior as it should. Those consequences forced us to confront what we'd done to see Ms. Ramirez as a real person, not collateral damage in our privileged lives. What consequences specifically? Construction delays, investor concerns, stock decline. The market responded to our moral failure with economic consequences. That's appropriate. Another reporter, what about the financial arrangements? Some sources suggest you've lost significant assets. We're making a $50 million donation to the Hospitality Workers Relief Fund, which supports service industry workers facing abuse. Additionally, we're transferring ownership stakes in one of our properties to charity. Richard's jaw tightened. These aren't punishments. They're attempts at restitution. Mr. Ethan Sterling, a reporter called. Will you continue in your role at Sterling Group? Ethan looked at his father, then back. I'll be working behind the scenes. No public role, no representing the company. I need to learn that visibility is a privilege, not a right. The humiliation on his face was obvious. Real. The press conference continued for 20 minutes. Question after question. Richard and Ethan answered all of them, never deflecting, never making excuses. When it ended, they left without the usual confident stride. They looked smaller, diminished. Sophia sat, frozen, tears running down her face. They'd apologized, really apologized on camera in front of the world. Her phone exploded with messages, friends, co-workers, strangers who'd followed the story. The video was already going viral. Not the original humiliation, but this two powerful men brought to their knees by accountability. Did you see, her co-worker Maria texted? They actually did it. Sophia couldn't respond. She just watched the replay over and over, hardly believing it. In a coffee shop, Dante watched on his phone, Luca beside him. It's already got 2 million views, Luca said, trending #1 on Twitter. The reactions were swift and brutal. This is what actual accountability looks like. Billionaires finally facing real consequences. Never thought I'd see it. That wasn't PR, that was a public execution. Within an hour, the narrative shifted. This wasn't just an apology, it was a symbol. Proof that even the wealthy and powerful could be held responsible. By 3:00 p.m., the effects rippled through Dante's network. Cement trucks are rolling to Hudson Yards, Victor reported. Just got the green light. Steel delivery confirmed for Tribeca, Tommy added. City permits are suddenly moving forward, Joey said with a smile. Environmental review expedited. Zoning variances approved. It's like magic. It wasn't magic. It was Dante giving a silent signal that the war was over. The Sterlings had paid their debt. Construction could resume. By evening, Sterling Group stock had stabilized up 2% by closing bell. Investors, seeing the public accountability and signs that projects were moving again, stopped panicking. Banks that had been nervous relaxed. Goldman quietly indicated they wouldn't call any loans early. Chase sent Richard a message congratulating him on handling the situation appropriately. The empire was breathing again, but everyone knew the truth. Dante Morelli held the strings. One wrong move, one slip back into arrogance, and he could pull them again. At 8:00 p.m., Dante came home to his brownstone in Brooklyn. Sophia was in the kitchen, making dinner, the TV on in the background, still replaying clips of the press conference. She turned when he entered, her eyes red from crying. Did you see? I saw. She pulled him into a hug. I can't believe they actually apologized. I thought nothing would happen, that people like them never face consequences. Everyone faces consequences eventually, Dante said quietly. Sometimes it just takes longer. Sophia pulled back, studying his face. You seem unsurprised. I'm glad you got justice, that's all. She searched his eyes, some instinct telling her there was more to this story, but she didn't push. Thank you, she said finally, for being here, for supporting me through this. Always amore, always. They ate dinner together, watching the news coverage. Sophia smiled for the first time in a week, reading supportive messages from strangers who'd seen her fight and win. What she didn't know, what she would never know, was that her husband hadn't just supported her. He'd waged a silent war, dismantled an empire, bought their debt, controlled their fate, all without firing a shot. All because someone had forgotten that the woman serving drinks was someone's wife, someone's love, someone who mattered. Dante Morelli had reminded them, and the whole city had watched the lesson. 1 hour earlier, across town, Carlo Genovese sat in his car watching the news on his phone, cursing softly. The press conference had caught him by surprise. His plan had been to approach Richard Sterling tomorrow with an alternate offer, to swoop in as Morelli was tightening the screws. Too late now. The Sterlings had surrendered. The opportunity was gone. What now? Asked his driver. We adapt, Carlo said. Morelli made a mistake exposing himself like this. Now everyone knows he has power over the Sterling Empire, including the feds. The tip line. Make the call, anonymous. Tell them the Sterling Group is being extorted by Dante Morelli, that there are shell companies money laundering the works. Boss, if the feds start digging, they won't find us. They'll find Morelli, and with him distracted by investigations, we can move on his territory. The driver nodded, reaching for his burner phone. Carlo settled back in his seat, watching the rerun of the press conference. A setback, not a defeat. Morelli had won this round, but he'd made himself visible doing it. And in their world, visibility was dangerous. Day 7 night, the city had moved on to new scandals, new outrages. But in certain circles, boardrooms, construction sites, city offices, people still whispered about what had happened to the Sterlings. Dante sat in his living room reading the Wall Street Journal. The headline, Sterling Group stabilizes after tumultuous week, projects resume. The article praised Richard's transparent accountability and noted that construction delays had mysteriously resolved themselves. Analysts called it a remarkable recovery. They had no idea what had really happened. Sophia came downstairs fresh from a shower, wrapped in Dante's old college sweatshirt. She curled up beside him on the couch. Still reading about it? She asked. Just checking the aftermath. She was quiet for a moment. Then Dante, can I ask you something? Always. How did all this happen? The apology, the press conference, everything. Her eyes searched his face. It feels like more than just public pressure. Dante set down the newspaper. He'd known this conversation would come eventually. Sophia was too smart not to wonder. What do you think happened? He asked carefully. I think she chose her words slowly. I think the Sterlings had some very unfortunate problems this week. Construction problems, financial problems that made them realize they needed to make things right. That's one way to see it. And I think, she continued, that my husband who works in construction might know more about those problems than he's telling me. Dante met her eyes. Would you want to know really? Sophia considered this. The past week, watching powerful men brought low seeing justice done, it had felt like a miracle, like the universe finally balancing itself. But miracles didn't just happen. Someone made them happen. You did more than defend me, she said quietly. You took down an empire, didn't you? Dante smiled faintly. No, Amore. I reminded them who builds their foundations. There's a difference, Vasikus. How much of it was you? Does it matter? I guess not. Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder. I just want to know one thing. Are you safe? Did you do anything that could come back on us? Everything I did was legal. Complicated, but legal. Dante kissed the top of her head. And it's over now. They learned their lesson. We move forward. Sophia nodded, accepting this. Some questions didn't need full answers. I love you, she said. Whatever you did or didn't do, thank you for having my back. That's not negotiable. They sat in comfortable silence, the TV playing low in the background. 3 weeks later, Ethan Sterling's Instagram account went dark. No more nightclub photos. No more yacht parties. No more designer suits and champagne bottles. Friends texted. He didn't respond. Tabloids called his publicist. No comment. He still worked at Sterling Group in a windowless office on the 4th floor, reviewing contract proposals and market reports. Important work, invisible work. His assistant brought him coffee one morning. Rough night, Mr. Sterling. Every night's rough, Ethan muttered. He'd learned what true powerlessness felt like. Not having money taken away his trust fund was intact, but having relevance taken away. Being nobody, being invisible, just like he'd made Sophia feel. The lesson was carved into his bones now. Richard Sterling met with Dante once a month, always at the Brooklyn warehouse, always alone. They reviewed ongoing projects, discussed supply schedules, maintained their business relationship. Richard never missed a meeting, never questioned prices, never complained about terms. He'd learned his place in the ecosystem. The Hudson Yards Tower is ahead of schedule, Richard reported. Should complete by July. Good. Dante reviewed the paperwork. And the donation, the charity. $50 million is fully deployed. They've already helped 200 workers dealing with harassment cases. Dante nodded, approval. Your son, invisible as requested. He's different now. Quieter, maybe even learning something. Good for him. Richard hesitated then. I wanted to thank you for not destroying us completely. You could have. I didn't need to destroy you. I needed you to understand. Dante met his eyes. You understand now. Yes. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. I understand. He left with his signed contracts, driving back to Manhattan, still building towers, but never forgetting who made them possible. For weeks after the press conference, Sophia returned to work at the Riverside Grand Hotel. She'd considered quitting, but realized that would be letting them win in a different way. So she walked through those doors with her head high. The staff applauded when she entered. Quietly, respectfully, but they applauded. Marco hugged her. Even the manager, red-faced and awkward, mumbled an apology. I should have defended you that night. I am sorry. Sophia nodded. Thank you. She worked her shifts, served tables, brought drinks, did her job with pride. When wealthy patrons came through, some recognized her. A few whispered. Most looked away, uncomfortable. But Sophia noticed something else. They were polite now, careful. They said please and thank you. They didn't snap fingers or make demands. Word had spread. The waitress who brought billionaires to their knees. The woman you didn't disrespect. At the end of her shift, an elderly woman at table 7 left a note with her tip. Thank you for showing them that dignity matters. We're all rooting for you. Sophia folded the note carefully and put it in her pocket. That night, she came home to Dante cooking dinner. His terrible attempt at pasta that would probably be inedible, but was made with love. "How was work?" he asked. "Good, really good, actually." She kissed his cheek. "People were nice, respectful as they should be. I think I'm going to be okay, Dante." "Better than okay. I feel like I matter now, like people see me." Dante turned from the stove, taking her hands. "You always mattered, Amore. Some people just needed to be reminded." She smiled. "My mysterious husband who builds foundations." "That's me." They ate terrible pasta and laughed about their day and talked about ordinary things. Because that's what they were, ordinary people, a contractor and a waitress building a life together in Brooklyn. The world would never know that Dante Morelli controlled the city's construction empire, that he brought down billionaires with a phone call and rebuilt them with a nod. That was fine. He didn't need recognition. He just needed Sophia to smile when she came home, to walk with her head high, to know she was protected, valued, loved. Everything else was just concrete and steel foundations holding up a city that would never know his name. And that's exactly how Dante wanted it. The FBI field office in Manhattan received an anonymous tip at 9:32 a.m. on Monday morning. A detailed allegation about Dante Morelli, his control of construction unions, his shell companies, his connection to the Sterling Group. Special Agent Karen Prescott read the report with interest. "Looks credible," she told her supervisor. "Detailed knowledge of operations, financial structures. Worth investigating." "Who's the source?" "Anonymous. But the specificity suggests insider knowledge." "Set up preliminary surveillance. Let's see if there's something here before we commit resources." By evening, two agents in an unmarked car were parked across from Morelli Construction Supply, watching, waiting, taking photos. In their world, patience was a weapon. They'd watched Dante's operation for weeks, maybe months. Build a case methodically, find the weak links, turn associates into witnesses. If Dante Morelli had exposed himself but us by going after the Sterlings, they would find the evidence. If he'd overreached, they would be there to catch him. The dance was just beginning. 3 months later, Sophia stood in front of a small storefront in Brooklyn. The sign above read, "Sophia's," in elegant script. Her restaurant, her dream. "What do you think?" Dante asked, arm around her shoulders. "It's perfect," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "How did you be? Oh, I've been saving, planning, waiting for the right moment." The lie came easily after years of practice. Better she think he'd scraped together enough for a small restaurant than know he owned half the block. Inside, the space was cozy, intimate. 20 tables, a small bar, a kitchen visible through a wide window. Just as she'd described in dozens of late-night conversations. "Marco will be your head chef," Dante said. "He's excited to work for you." "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll make this place as special as you are." Sophia turned to him, eyes shining. "You believe in me that much?" "Always have." They walked through the space, Sophia touching everything, making plan, bubbling with excitement. Dante watched her, memorizing every detail of her happiness. Outside, across the street, a dark sedan idled. Two men with cameras and patience. They'd been following Dante for months, building a case that seemed to go nowhere. No meetings with known criminals. No suspicious cash transfers. Just a construction contractor who spent time with his wife, met with business associates, lived a surprisingly normal life. They'd keep watching, keep waiting. But Dante had survived in this business for 20 years because he was careful, because he kept his two worlds separate, because he understood that power came from shadows, not from spotlights. Let them watch. All they would see was a man who loved his wife, who built things that lasted, who understood the value of strong foundations. Sophia kissed him in front of her restaurant, oblivious to the cameras, the watchers, the whispers in certain circles about her husband. All she knew was that her dream was coming true, and the man who made it possible was holding her hand. For Dante, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.